when I'm buying mortgage notes is that we're literally going to banks and buying that mortgage loan, whether it's a residential property note or a commercial property note. We're buying the mortgage at a discount because usually the borrowers haven't paid in 6 months to 6 years in some cases. We're buying what they owe at a discount and then becoming the lender. And then we make our money because we bought that mortgage at a discount. We can reach out to the borrowers and say, hey, what's going on? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? If you want to stay, you got to pay because pay, stay,
Welcome to the RealPropPro podcast, where strategy, innovation, and wealth converge to redefine real estate investing.
Hello, and welcome to the RealPropPro podcast. I'm your host, Ian Dietler, Sacramento-based real estate investor. On this show, we talk to real people doing real deals, sharing lessons, mindset shifts, and opportunities that can change lives. At RealPropPro, we train investors in fix and flips, tax deed and tax lien investing, creative financing, wholesaling, and so much more. If you're ready to take action and start doing real deals, visit RealPropPro.com to get free tools and access upcoming virtual events. Today's guest is Scott Carson, a nationally recognized note investor, speaker, and educator. He's the host of the Note Closer Show and has helped thousands of people learn how to buy and flip distressed debt, including myself. Today, we're going to dive into his story, how he got into note investing, how you can find deals and buy notes, and the mindset required to win in this unique space. Plus, if we have time, we'll tap into where he sees AI fitting into the future of note investing and how he's using it in his business. Scott, welcome to the show.
Honored to be here, Ian, man. Excited. Let's have some fun today, huh?
We really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. We were just talking about how many shows you've done, which is extremely impressive. I thought you'd done almost 1,000, and you were saying it's even more than that.
Yeah, when you figure we've got the Note Closer Show podcast is coming up on its 1,000th episode. We've been doing it for 8 years, but then we've also got a couple spin-offs, 3 seasons of Note Camp, which is kind of it was our online summit we would record from, and then we've got Note Night in America, which is started off doing a Monday night webinar like 14 years ago, and we did it weekly, and it had done it for basically 13 years. Now it's just a rebroadcast because folks don't like to show up live to webinars. But yeah, man, it's 1,500, and then you add in the 300 other shows I've been a guest on or spoke on. So, but honored to be here, buddy. Always nice to see somebody taking action and kicking butt at what they're doing and launch a podcast. There's not enough of them out there right now, whether what people believe or not. But you're doing a great job, man. Very, very excited to be here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Let's go all the way back. On the show, we like to talk about people and like kind of what their life was like growing up. So where were you like born and raised, and what was life like when you were a kid?
Life was really good. I was, my family's all from Minnesota. I was born up there, but my parents moved to South Texas, and I grew up down in Corpus Christi for a while, and then which is right on the coast of Texas, and then parents moved across the bay to this little small town called Ingleside, Texas, of about 5,000 people. My dad opened a local hardware store in there, and my mom and dad were working in there, and I worked in there. And when you weren't going to school, you were working in the store or working on mowing lawn and doing chores and stuff like that. So I feel very blessed. A lot of kids may not have thought that, but looking back now, it's definitely built a work ethic and an entrepreneurial spirit that my parents had, and it got me working as a young age, from running the register to cutting keys, cutting glass, cutting and threading pipe, and running a register and stuff like that. It really, I think it helped me mature earlier than a lot of kids, stuff like that, and have that spirit of, hey, I can do it, because I used working in the hardware store to help me start going and doing odd jobs and working with people to mow their lawns, and I ran my own business basically doing cutting grass, stuff like that. My buddies would come work with me. And I think that just led to just an absolute great thing. I look back at it now and really enjoyed it. Stuff like that. Maybe not so much when I was saying when my buddies are driving by, hey, we're going to the beach. Have fun, Carson. While I'm mowing in 100-degree weather. So, but yeah, growing up the coast is great. Still, my mom still lives down that neck of the woods. Dad passed away, a few years back. But, Corpus is an interesting city. I really like the smaller town, or the Texas Riviera, they call it, down in Ingleside and Aransas, stuff to the neck of the woods. We'll probably end up moving back to the neck of the woods before too long, like a lot of folks do. So, but just, working young, always had chores. We weren't the richest people, but we weren't poor by any means. We always had food on the table. And my parents, my dad was definitely my hero growing up, and my mom is one of my heroes as I've gotten older and more mature to everything that she did. She went back to school after 20 years out of high school to become an RN and went into nursing. And when my dad's health got bad, and just absolutely just became the bread earner. And I've never heard my parents say you can't do something. And they never told us we couldn't. It was always, well, if you want to do that, how are you going to do that yourself? And that leads to a lot of, okay, I'll find out a way. Tell me I can't do something, I'll prove you wrong. And right, Ian?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that goes to, that really talks about type of mindset. So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later into the show, because on this show, we love to focus on mindset, because we see so many people trying to get into real estate investing. It doesn't matter what strategy you're using, you still have to have the right mindset, because things aren't always going to turn out the way that you think, and things aren't always going to go right. So we really like to focus on that mindset of being able to be like, okay, well, since this bad thing happened, how can I adjust? Or kind of like you just said, it's not that I can't do it, it's more so of how I do it. So we really like to focus on that mindset.
Yeah, I would typically say that's the biggest difference between people that are successful versus those that aren't successful. I mean, you have people that have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth and they fail, and then you have immigrants and the people that had nothing and overcome extreme obstacles. And part of it is that the biggest tool and biggest asset you have is that 6 inches between ears. Sometimes it's 8 if you got a big old melon head like I do. But other times it's the biggest tool you have, but it also is the biggest handicap. Oh, I can't do that. And it's like Henry Ford said early on, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're correct.
Yeah, exactly. So, so you're kind of growing up with your mom and dad. You're in this awesome hardware store that your dad owns. That's great. What was high school like, and did you get into sports or any other activities?
Yeah, so Ingleside was a small little 3A high school. So I think I had originally around 80 kids in my class. I think we had 60 kids that graduated. Finally, I mean, only like 400 people in high school. So plenty of opportunities. I played football, basketball, baseball, ran track a little bit, was in the one-act play, theater, was in the band for a little while, junior high, stuff like that. But for the most part, I was an athlete and an academic. I was very smart. I wouldn't say I didn't make straight A's. I had too much fun. Let's just say that. I made A's and B's and occasional C's because, I'm not a big fan of science, but I put my mind to it, definitely. And that led to doing some good things. I ended up getting an academic and an athletic scholarship to play college football. That was one of my big dreams to do, and was able to accomplish that. And it's just a great area. A lot of people talked about how close-knit our senior class was. There's 60-plus kids roughly, and all of us got along. The jocks got along with the band geeks, and then the everybody in between got along. If something was going wrong, or we see somebody on the side of the road, we stopped to help them, or we would all hang out. Maybe not every weekend, but we got along enough that there wasn't any kind of cliques like there are in a lot of high school, stuff like that. It was just a really good group of kids, and I'm still proud of the fact that I still communicate with a lot of those folks today through social, thank God. It was it was fun, but it also made me realize I wanted to get the heck out of Ingleside. I did not want to stay there, and there are still friends today that still live there. Never left Texas, and I just don't get that. So it was great place to raise kids. It's obviously grown a little bit different now, but I call Austin, Texas home, and I was probably one of the ones that went the furthest away for college, 8 to 10 hours away, and was out on my own playing ball and going to school for business and mass comm. I want to be the next radio DJ, the next Stuart Scott from ESPN. You know what I mean? So,
Note Night in America, man.
That's part of it. The logo looks sure looks a whole like the NFL logo, but anyway,
Yeah.
or Sunday Night Football. But we borrow from the best out there. Don't steal, we borrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Awesome. So if you guys don't know, check out Note Night in America. Check out Scott's podcast as well. So much great stuff on there. You have some amazing guests. I kind of know you all the way back from the No Camp days. I don't know if it was the second or third note. It was a long time ago that I was watching or learning as much as I could from you on those events. So
I actually went in. It was actually the second one we did. It was, I went back and found your registration and the list you're on because I keep everything from those. So I was like, yeah, Note Camp Season 2 for sure. It was good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so check him out on that. Now, you'd played football for, 2 years of football, and then what was life like after that? Did you start working at like a W-2 job or anything like that? What was life like right after college?
Yeah, I mean, I took a year off after, I transferred I went to this little school originally up out of Dallas, and then ended up moving to West Texas, Angelo State for a little bit. Then took a year off and moved to Central Texas and San Marcos and finished up my final 2 years of school getting a business degree. And out of school, I took a W-2 job like a lot of folks, figuring out, I got a business degree, made the dean's list, and, I've interviewed with about 20 different companies and settled on probably the worst one I could have settled on, Enterprise Rent-A-Wreck. You know what I mean? I was in that management training. I was sold the dream. It only lasted about 90 days till I realized this is not what I want to do. My managers are not living the life that I want to live, and thought I'd go back to graduate school. And I remember the district manager, Jeff Klein was his name. He goes, "Why would you want to go to graduate school? We'll teach you everything you need to know here." And I was like literally requesting, can I get off 30 minutes early 2 nights a week so I can drive to school? They didn't let me do that, so I put my notice in. I was gone, and then got into the world of cell phones and started working for Verizon Wireless, and that I really blossomed at. Great sales training. Was just a top performer. I was one of the top sales reps in all of Texas, and set all these sales statistics, sales goals and sales records, and made a nice chunk of money. But that was also working weekends in the malls and stuff like that. And I fortunately, a buddy of mine, a really good friend of mine now, came up to me and started talking to me about financing and finances and getting your stuff together. And I was like, that's important. And of course, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad about this time. And so I met with Boyd, and we got started my first Roth IRA, and we got a little life insurance for me and my wife at the time. And he's like, you can learn how to do this. I was like, this is interesting. So while I was working in finance, I went and got my securities license, my insurance license, and started doing that as a part-time hobby with Boyd. And then I guess I've been at Verizon for about 2 years and left that for about a year. And we bought our first house and almost lost our first house because about 2 more investment properties at the same time, and got laid off from my finance job. And my tenants got laid off from their job at Dell. So I went from making about 6 figures a year to, basically trying to pay for 3 first mortgages and 3 second mortgages on a private school teacher salary. And did not like real estate at that point, basically, when you get kicked in the teeth like that. So it took us a little while. I mean, 6 months were pretty tight there. I was working odd jobs, delivering packages for FedEx, waiting tables, and bartending at Chili's at nights and stuff like that. And licked my wounds and got a job working in high tech here in Austin for a little while, and did that. It was okay. But then Boyd came to me, and this has been over a period of about 4 years, came back to me and said, "Hey, man, I started a mortgage company with a couple of real estate investors here. I think you'd be perfect to help us out because I need the help." And I said, "Okay, well, let me go, meet with them." And I went and met with them. And at this point, I was actually working for Chase Bank at the time, doing well there. But I was like, I want to get back in that real estate bug. I want to be more the entrepreneur versus working for a company. And so July 4th of 2004, I gave my notice, which is hard to believe. It's just over 21 years ago, basically. And that was my last W-2 job, was working for Chase. And started a mortgage company with my buddy Boyd, and learned real estate investing from Ron LeGrand and my mentor Bob Leonetti at the time, and his partner Jamie Kayla. He and she were just completely amazing. So 4 years while doing mortgages, I was learning creative financing, rehabbing, fixing flips, the note business, so that when everything happened in 2008 with the crash, I left the mortgage origination side and started buying notes myself. So that's kind of, it's exciting. 21 years since my last W-2 job kind of cracks me up a little bit.
Wow, congratulations on that. That's a great feat for you to be able to, get into this real estate investing and owning businesses at full time. And, you've never looked back. So that's really cool that you've been able to, sustain this, amazing streak and invest the way that you do, and have all these businesses teaching people how to do stuff, and especially in the notes. So, kudos to you. Great job on all of that. And, I see you out here doing a lot of stuff, so I know that you're always busy and you're always, helping people as much as you can. So, we really appreciate that, and just want to say, thank you to you for all you do.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it doesn't mean there was all uphill or all peaks. There's some valleys in there, ups and downs as an entrepreneurial thing, and as market shifts change and stuff like that. I mean, entrepreneurship is not easy. It's not for everyone. I'm just telling you that. But you have to understand it's a process, and there are going to be good days and bad days. Now, the best thing is that my peaks are greater than anybody would ever imagine. I have friends and people that I know that I just would have never imagined. But the valleys are so much higher than the peaks ever were beforehand. And you just got to stick with it. And sometimes, like I was talking to a guy the other day, he's like, I'm going to quit my job. I go, no, don't quit your job. Keep your job. Let's build a roadmap to success. Let's work 12 to 24 months at it and replace your income, so it's a much easier way versus just going cold turkey. You know what I mean? But, part of the reason I started coaching and teaching people how to do what I do is because I had that 4 years, learning. I was like, God, if you help me get through a bad situation or get me through this, I'm going to make sure and help as many people along the way as I possibly can. That's why we just crank out so much content and try to help as many investors as possible.
That's awesome. Now, you'd mentioned 2008 happened. Was that something that really affected you and your business, or were you pretty well isolated from that type of massive drop that happened?
It affected us on the mortgage business because we went from originating loans to not originating anything. You know what I mean? So that hurt there. I mean, luckily I had some investment properties. I'd started, buying some fix and flips and stuff like that. And I bought a couple properties right there at the cusp. Like, I'll give you an example. There's a house that was a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, 3,500 square foot house. It was valued at like 310, 320. When I bought it for 150, and I borrowed 30 grand to get to 180. Well, in a matter of 6 months, the values of that properties in the neighborhood dropped because of foreclosure. So they went from being valued at 300 plus down to 150. It was upside down. You know what I mean? That's not where you want to be on a fix and flip. Okay. Of course, you had people, other people, in another rehab, I was able to get out of it and sold it off and made some money. But in that one, I basically just had to move into it for a period of time while dealing with a crazy market like it was. Now, the flip side of it, I started buying more debt. So I started getting more lists sent to me from banks and hedge funds. Like, okay, I can offset some of my losses by buying some of this debt and either flipping it into other investors, wholesaling it, or taking it back myself and working through that. So there was pros and cons during that period. There was about, I got divorced in 2008, so that was a little bit of a hiccup I didn't expect. I had a business partner I was working with for about a year, 2 years too, that we went our separate ways. And so it was kind of 2010 was, well, I'm going to do this myself, basically. And I literally kind of sold everything I own, Ian. Even the house I was living in, I sold it, wrote a check back to the investors who'd funded the deal and said, here you go. And decided I was going to start traveling for, a year at least. Planned out this baseball journey across the country to hit all 30 Major League Baseball parks in about 30 weeks. And, when I planned that and wrote down that goal, literally went on to ESPN and found out who was playing in Houston and Atlanta and Miami and all those things. I wrote it down on a calendar and just put it up to divine intervention. And fortunately, over the next couple of weeks, I started getting phone calls from real estate investment clubs and conferences and stuff that were going on. I said, hey, would you come speak to our group, or can we use your videos or blogs in our newsletter? I'm like, yeah, when do you want me to come speak? And the dates they wanted me to come speak lined up almost perfectly with this baseball journey. So I said, sure, God, all right, I'm going to follow your lead there. I don't need to have a helmet or a baseball hat, bat upside the head. I can follow what you're telling me. So that's what I did. I went, traveled when I thought would be 30 weeks, turned into basically 3.5 years of nonstop travel and talking to investment clubs across the country, buying notes, working with banks. Walking into bank conference rooms, and there's just stacks and stacks of loan files all the way to the ceiling, and just made for a very interesting time during those 3.5 plus years. Was the educator of the year, and we ended up we bought about I think 1 or 2 million and over $1 billion in distressed debt in the last 15 years, which is kind of crazy. So that makes sense.
That is crazy for sure. Do you remember the first note deal the first note that you purchased?
Yes, I do. It was a property in Detroit, Michigan. and it was on a list of like 1,500 notes from Banco Popular. Okay, Banco Popular is a bank out of Puerto Rico, South Miami, and this property looked like it was in pretty good shape, but Detroit was just this, smoking wreck of default. So I paid $500 for this note, and then I flipped it a week later for $1,500 for scrap metal. Basically, somebody was buying to go through, and he was like, "Oh yeah." So I was like, "Ooh, I just tripled my money in less than a month. This is pretty good." The next note I bought was on a, oh my God, it was this property out in Phoenix that we flipped. Actually, we partnered with our investor on a deal on this one. It was only like $2,500 we paid for it, and the guy owed like 30 on it. And after we got a cash for keys from the guy, my realtor was the investor that funded the deal. After all, we ended up splitting and making 16 grand each on the deal. It was a pretty good deal. That was from Wells Fargo Financial back in the day. And, we bought a lot of small little one-off stuff, but then got into multifamily deals from Capital One and buying some multifamily notes at big discounts, and then either selling those off to other wholesale investors or going through the foreclosure process to take the process back as well too. So yeah, you remember those first couple of stories and how this, I think because they're more stressful, what am I doing? Am I figuring this out? And how am I going to get this done? And like making bids on apartments and not having money in the bank to fund them, but knowing we could figure something out in 30 days,
Yeah. Can we take a step back here? Because I just realized that, there might be some listeners on the show that are like, what the heck are these notes?
Sure.
Can you do a quick overview of what notes are and how they're kind of different than buying an actual property?
Yeah, sure. Everybody's in the note space already, whether they know it or not. If you have a mortgage on a house, a car note, student loan debt, credit card debt, you owe your cousin Bubba $50. That's an IOU. Those are all technically notes. You know what I mean? But you're on the wrong side of the payment stream. What I talk about when I'm buying mortgage notes is that we're literally going to banks and buying that mortgage loan, whether it's a residential property note or a commercial property note. We're buying the mortgage at a discount because usually the borrowers haven't paid in 6 months to 6 years in some cases. We're buying what they owe at a discount and then becoming the lender. And then we make our money because we bought that mortgage at a discount. We can reach out to the borrowers and say, hey, what's going on? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? If you want to stay, you got to pay because pay, stay, and work out some sort of payment arrangement with the borrower and try to keep them in the property. That's actually where we make the most amount of our money. And the biggest bang for a buck is not by rehabbing the property, but rehabbing the borrower. I don't mean sending them to the Betty Ford clinic to dry out because they're alcoholics. Some of them are, but no, actually trying to keep people in their houses, and we're able to do that about 70% of the time. And so if they won't play ball and come to some sort of payment plan or liquidation, then we'll, with the same rights as the lender does, to foreclose, and then we can either sell that property off the auction, or take the property back and keep it and either rent it out, resell it, fix it up and sell it then, or turn it in rental. And so when you buy the note, you don't own the real estate. What you're actually buying is, and I keep a file here, this is a file folder in a property in Kankakee, Illinois, worth about $85. I paid $25 for it. Okay, and the borrower started making payments of $578 to me. So what their mortgage payment was. Now I became the bank. So when you look at that, we were able to hold on to this for 12 months, cash flow, which is really good. So they paid about $7 grand on my $25,000 investment. That's a pretty good yield in the first year, right? Well, it got even better because after 12 months, we sold this note because they were back on time. We sold this now back to Wall Street for $70K. So made an additional $45,000 in profit by holding it for 12 months without having to rehab the property, just working with the borrower to get them back on track because they were in a bad situation.
Yeah, it sounds like you had to rehab the note instead of the property.
That's what I love to do. I like to buy owner-occupied assets as I can. If I, sometimes, the properties need zero work. You were talking about this morning, we were doing that live stream on those 20 multifamily apartments where we could pick up the debt somewhere between 65 to 80% of what's owed on it, and they've all got equity. Well, some of these properties have been fully rehabbed that the underlying borrowers can't refinance out in today's market. So it leads for an opportunity for somebody like me to come in, buy it at a discount, either work with them to stay in the property management, or if they won't play ball or they want to get out of a bad deal, just deed it over to me. Now we own the property, do whatever we want with it.
Awesome. What are the best ways for new investors to get started in note investing?
You gotta learn. It's a total different mindset being the bank than it is being the property buyer, right? That's the biggest thing, and that's where if you don't know what you're doing, you'll overbid or do the wrong thing by trying to buy the note and basing it off like the maximum allowable offer (MAO) that people are used to in the rehab side, or ARV. Well, ARV does not exist in the note business. It's always as is because we may never end up with a property. So some of the best things is obviously there's a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts out there, including the Note Closure Show podcast. But we have a free class just designed to help you kind of learn the basics of it. If you go to noteweekend.com, exactly as it sounds, you can sign up. It's about a 3-hour class of how we teach the basics, how we find these, how we fund a deal, and then also how we make money and flip it. Whether it's flipping the paper or keeping it. And like I said, it's there designed to help you get a good overview of note investing and see if it's something that you want to pursue.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean, like I said, that's where I learned way back in the day on how to invest in notes was with you and your program. So, I can't recommend it enough to listeners to, not only check out the free stuff, but consider signing up with some of, Scott's programs. I think today I saw that you have like a monthly subscription as well.
Yeah, we have a monthly membership. It's $97 a month. It's designed to kind of help people spread out their costs because we do teach a full-blown 3-day workshop. It's usually $9.97. I think we're running a discount on it right now. And we host that 3-day class once a quarter. But the $97 a month membership I think it's the best bang for the industry because not only do we do weekly coaching calls with that group, we upload lists to folks so they can cherry pick it themselves. They can always book a phone call with me to get a little bit of coaching to help them when they're making an offer, trying to raise capital. All that's included in the monthly membership. So folks always tell me like we give way too much, because it includes the 3-day class as well. So it's just, besides there's a class on wholesaling notes and due diligence and marketing and raising capital, all designed in that thing to kind of give people a really great spot to go to. I think just the biggest bang for the buck is when we upload lists that people can cherry pick. They don't have to buy the whole tape, buy one note to get rock and rolling. And then there's also all sorts of education in there too, of how to raise capital from IRA investors, or what to say, what not to say to people to get them to fund your deal, whether it's a property or a note deal.
Now, you'd mentioned a couple terms there. I'd like to break that down for the listeners. So you'd mentioned tape. Can you talk to the listeners and explain what a tape is and usually where they come from?
Yeah, tape is just an Excel spreadsheet that lists all the details of a non-performing note. So like this tape of 20 notes was basically a spreadsheet, 20 line items deep. Every line is a different asset, different address, and it gives all the information from like the borrower's info, the payment history, when they last paid, the interest rate, the payment, where they're at in the foreclosure process, what's the full payoff amount, what's the value of the property. So it used to be on remember the big IBM, big blue computers used to have everything on a tape roll, and that's what they used to call it when they send out a tape. Well, these days it's just a set Excel spreadsheet that they send out with all the details, of the note, of the borrower, and stuff like that. And we get these from banks, lenders, hedge funds. Any mortgage company should be able to do a download, and it's going to download a spreadsheet of what they have as far as the lending portfolio. And the reason they do an Excel spreadsheet like that is it's all kind of uniform. I mean, some of it's different, but there's when it says like unpaid balance, that can match up if the loan's being sold or transferred to another company as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think, a lot of these terms, we kind of just talk about it. And then, when we talk to our listeners, they're like, what are you guys talking about? So
yeah,
I think it's really
exactly.
important to kind of explain some of these things. And again, explain like where to get them and like how to get them. I know that's something that you teach, so we don't need to go too deep into that. But I know you have a lot of really good strategies on how to get a hold of these special asset managers and stuff like that. So
yeah, when you're buying notes, you're not getting it from a realtor. There's not a multiple listing service. You've got to be direct to banks, and most of the banks aren't. Call the bank, say, "Hey, I want to buy notes and REOs or foreclosures," is what real estate owned is. They're not going to just send it to you. You got to get a hold of the right department, and jumping on LinkedIn, you can find people in the right departments that go by, like you said, special asset manager, secondary marketing manager, whole loan traders, or a chief credit risk officer. Those are the 4 most common names for people who handle the distressed note sales in any type of bank out there as well.
And there's another type of person that has notes, and I love that you have a name for this type of person. And I think you know what I'm going to say, the Joker broker. Can you explain to the listeners what a Joker broker is?
Yeah, I mean, this is nothing against any wholesalers out there. First and
Yeah.
foremost, you can wholesale notes. It's all about being direct. So, like, if I get a list in from a bank, like I got a list in from my buddy Matt this morning, well, if I turn around and sell it, send the list to Ian, and Ian's like, well, I don't want to buy anything, but I know Steve over here, and Steve's is buying notes. Well, Ian sends him the list. Ian kind of is the Joker broker, right? He's trying to sell it, but he's not direct to the source. And so you have people that will get these lists and they'll just blast it out to their buyers list and stuff like that. And they're a Joker broker. They don't really know deals. So like in the scenario, if Steven wanted to buy notes, he'd make an offer to Ian. Well, Ian's then going to turn around and send me the bids, but he's going to make it a little bit less so he can charge Steve 3 points or 3% or whatever he might be. And I'm going to then have to send the list in to Matt. Well, for Steve to get all the information, he's now got to get the information through 3 people. That's called a daisy chain. So Joker brokers create daisy. Like I just literally had a guy, literally right before we got on, this guy saw my post about this morning. He goes, hey, you got notes for sale? And I'm like, yes, I do. Are they for you? Are you buying? Or are you looking to broker? And the guy said own, which I mean him himself. Then he says, well, I have buyers. I'm a buyer's rep. Ugh, I just vomited. So somebody's saying they're a buyer's rep or a seller's rep just means they're a Joker broker. I'm like, educate, like, dude, don't say that word. Because I got a buyer who's going to, I'm like, no. If you're not buying for your own portfolio, I'm not going to send you this list. I don't want it being blasted out because I've had my own list I've sent out before, Ian, come back to me at like 20% higher than what I'm trying to sell it, and I just have to laugh about that. So that's something we see in the note business that, sometimes you'll deal with Joker broker. I mean, there's Joker brokers in traditional real estate too that are just thrown against the wall trying to stick like spaghetti. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they kind of use co-wholesaling as a term. It's like, well, they're a wholesaler, and I'm going to wholesale that wholesale deal to another person, and then another person's going to co-wholesale that. So they have 3 people trying to get the same wholesale fee, and it's like, man, how thin can you slice that pie?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I'm not opposed to wholesalers.
Yeah.
Occasional. I mean, I've got a broker from a fund that isn't selling anything they own. They're, getting listed from like 600 banks. That they're willing to partition off and sell to us, and that's fine. He knows I'm buying from my own portfolio. And he's also like, hey, if I bring a buyer to a table, he's willing to pay me, a point off that. I'm like, okay, that's a good relationship. So if I find a buyer, I'm gonna step away, say, hey, go talk to Matt directly. So we're not creating any type of Disney chain. He's talking directly. But you have a lot of people out there that don't want to do that, so they're gonna send out what's called a sanitized tape, where the address is removed, or they're just going to send details of the property, details and not the full address. I don't bid off zip codes. You can't do due diligence off a city's state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people just come from a scarcity mentality, and a lot of educators out there are like, oh, you can't share information. I'm a big believer that there's plenty of deals to go around, but I still have to protect my sellers because what is going to happen? They're going to get a list. If a list is blasted out all across the internet, it actually reduces the validity and the value of that offering. And, people don't want to know. I mean, lenders don't want borrowers or people that are clients to know that they're selling distressed notes. It reduces the value of their portfolio overall, and they're afraid that people are going to make a run on the bank or stuff like that. Not that that would happen. It's not 1929 again, but same thing. You're dealing with addresses and borrower information, so you got to protect that as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Again, for the listeners, hopefully some of this is starting to make sense a little bit on how you're buying the debt, how you're getting these lists of notes that are available. And then how would someone, like, if they have identified a note that they want from the tape, how would they go about purchasing that note?
Yeah, it's really easy. You're going to make an offer. I mean, usually it's just an email direct back to the seller. Hey, here's the loan number. Here's what I want to offer for it. And then, I mean, you're obviously do a little bit of upfront due diligence, checking the value of the property, look at the condition. You're not going to go out and drive by the property all the time. It's hard to do that when you're buying across the country. But using Zillow as just a base guide, not due diligence, but as an upfront guide. Because then if the bank accepts your offer, then you're going to have a period of time to do a deeper due diligence dive. Then you're going to order a broker price opinion, which is a realtor pulling comps and driving by the property, making sure the value, the as-is value of the asset You're going to look at like the loan file docs that I just shared, where you're going to actually make sure everything's there so you have the right to foreclose, review the loan documents, making sure it's a note that you want to end up owning. You're going to do a title report and pull to see what's on title as far as liens, judgments, anything like that. And then if all that works out well, besides, you're also going to do some due diligence on the borrower. Is it occupied? Have they made any payments? Are the utilities on? Is the insurance still being paid? Are the taxes up to date? If all those things work out in your favor and your bid still makes sense, great. You then wire money to the bank and they'll send you all the documents usually a couple days later. If it doesn't work out, then you can what we call fade our bid or reduce our bid, and they can the sellers can either accept it or counter it or say, no, we don't want to accept your new offer. And if they don't accept it, guess what? You just walk away scot-free. You're out some due diligence costs, but those due diligence costs really work as an insurance policy. Make sure you're not buying a piece of shit, or buying a property that's actually there or not trashed out or anything like that.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit here. If the end goal was to acquire the property, but you wanted to do that by buying, let's say, a non-performing note and then and then acquire the property, what would that process look like?
So here's the thing. There's no guarantee that you're going to end up with a property on a note, because you don't know what's going to happen at the foreclosure auction. That's like the wild, wild west. Okay. Now there is some ways that you can kind of control that in a little case. So I'll give you an example. So if you're driving down the road, you see a distressed property, a property that's got some weeds on it. It's the typical, driving for dollar scenario. The first thing is to find out who the lender is, who the bank is. Okay. Now, if the lender is like Bank of America, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, they're not going to sell you a one-off note. Okay. They're just not going to do it. There's no reason for them to sell a one-off note. They just don't, it's just too small. They sell in like $50 million portfolios. Okay. So if you got 50 million, great, we can talk. If not, move on. So that's the first thing, is finding out who the lender is. And it doesn't need to be a big lender. It also doesn't mean to be like a small branch, like a one-off bank either. That's not a good point, because they're not going to be able to sell that note at a discount. We find the biggest bang for the buck in like regional banks that have 5 or more branches, up to some of the bigger lenders. And so once you identify who the lender is and then see if they will sell notes, it's all about finding the right department in there. But then also understanding what's owed on the property. If they owe more on the property than what it's actually worth, you can often get a bigger discount for that. 50, 60 cents on the dollar as is value. If they owe 300, the house is worth 200, we might pick that up for 100. Okay. The other way scenario that we see, especially in California, a note where there's a lot of equity. So let's say the property is worth 300, but they only owe 200 on that. In that case, you're not going to get it at 50 cents on the dollar. You may have to pay like 80, 90 cents on the dollar of the 200, which could still be a deal, but it's not going to be as good as a deal as buying at 50 cents on the dollar. So if it is, they owe more than the property is worth, like let's go back to that first scenario. They owe 300, a house is only worth 200. If you're the lender, after you've bought that note at 100, you can determine what you want to sell it for at auction. All right. So if you really want to own that property and don't want anybody to bid, then what you do is just list the property, make the opening bid, the full payoff. Because if you say the full bid is 300, well, the house only worth 200, no investor is going to pay 125 or 130%. We can agree to that, right, Ian? Mm-hmm. So then nobody buys it, then you take the property back and now it's yours to do whatever you want with it. The other scenario where there is equity is where it gets tricky. So the other strategy is it's worth 300, they only owe 200, you paid 90 cents on the dollar, means you're paying around, or 80 to 90, somewhere between 160 and 190. Since you're the bank, your maximum bid at the foreclosure auction can be the full legal amount. So if the legal amount's 200, that's the most you can put as the payoff. And we all know a lot of times properties that are at auction do sell above 60, 70 cents on the dollar. So 70 cents on the dollar of a $300,000 property is $210, right? In other areas, California, you guys can often go up to 80 cents on the dollar, depending on what the after repair aspect is, right? So in that case, if it sells for $240, guess what? You don't get the $240. You only get what the legal amount is. So in this scenario, the legal amount's $200. If you paid $180 for it and it only sold above that $240, you're only getting $20,000. Hopefully that covers your money costs and you make a little bit of profit. For me, that's often too skinny. The $40,000, the $240 minus your $200, the $40,000 doesn't go to you. It goes to, if there's a second lien or any other liens against the property, if there's no other liens against the property, that's going to go back to the borrower, and the borrower's got to claim that. So that's why we usually target assets that they owe more than the property is worth. When we do buy equity deals, we'll buy the note at a discount, and when we become the bank, then we can maybe even sometimes work out a deed in lieu, cash for keys to the borrower. But you can't approach the borrower before you actually own the note. That's a violation of fair debt collection practices. So you have to that's why we do a lot of sleuthing on the borrower. How old are they? How long they lived in the property? The great thing is that during the due diligence period, we're getting a look at the actual servicing notes. So like if the borrower's called the bank and talked to an employee about the mortgage payments, or the bank has reached out to the borrower to get them back on track, we see all those notes in the servicing notes and can say, okay, this borrower wants to stay or wants to go. And that helps us determine our strategy in a lot of cases, and also determines what we're going to pay for the note too, if we think we get a bid higher or bid lower.
There was a term that you used when you were talking about that you said deed in lieu. What is that, and how would that convey ownership?
Yeah, so a deed in lieu is basically a friendly foreclosure. Maybe you've heard cash for keys, all right? So when we're buying the note, and we're buying the first position only, we don't buy second liens. We only buy in the first lien position, okay? So nothing can wipe us out except taxes and God. And we pay the taxes and put insurance on the property. So if a borrower's living in a property, instead of us going through the foreclosure process, which can vary anywhere from like 21 days here in Texas to 3 years in New York, instead of us going through that 3-year process and cranking out more attorney fees and servicing costs and holding costs, it makes sense for us to say, hey, instead of going through a foreclosure process can be drained out, going to the borrower and say, hey, if you don't want to pay, you can't afford to pay the modified payment or the payment plan, instead of going through a foreclosure process, let's just give you some money to walk, or let's have you just sign the property over to us, deed the property back to the bank. That's called a deed in lieu of us foreclosing on them, so they don't have a foreclosure on their credit. So foreclosure will kill somebody's credit for 7 years. Late pays, 24 months. A BK will only affect about 24 months, but a foreclosure will kill their credit for 7 years. So that's why it's like, listen, you owe more than the property's worth. You don't have a payment plan that makes sense. You can't afford to pay this. Let's just give you some money to walk. And a lot of times we'll give them cash for keys, give them some money to get out of the property and move on. If they got a ton of equity and they're not in a position to rehab the property, we may give them a big chunk. Like we've done anywhere from like $1,000 to $75,000 for cash for keys before. Just depends on the scenario.
Yeah, and so once that deed in lieu of foreclosure is completed, the lender now owns that property. That's called an REO, correct?
Exactly. Once the actual document, the deed is signed, the quitclaim deed is usually what it is, and we go record it, we now own that property. And yeah, it's technically a real estate owned asset is what we call it, a REO. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that to our listeners. I know we have a lot of new listeners, and even a lot of seasoned investors aren't very familiar with note investing. So I really like how you're able to really break it down into, digestible pieces and, in terms that people can understand.
Yeah, note investing is a niche within a niche, definitely. It's a smaller niche. And most people, when they think note investing, they think of like owner financing a property or selling a property in terms or buying on terms. And that's one niche. That's creating a note and stuff like that. But we mostly buy direct from banks, which is a whole different niche within the whole note investing world.
Very nice. I appreciate you explaining that. What type of mindset do you think separates successful note investors from those who struggle?
You've got to be coachable, and you got to have multiple strategies on stuff like that. If you're just trying, I'll give a great example. I was talking with a guy today, and he's been trying to buy a note, but he does it ass backwards. Like he's trying to go find somebody to buy the property from him in case he ends up foreclosing and doesn't sell at the auction. I'm like, dude, you're all worried about Z. You need to worry about A, B, C, because if you buy at the right price and go through the legal process, you won't have to worry about this one guy buying your property. Everybody, just selling it on the MLS or selling it traditionally, you have plenty of buyers out there that provide it's in a good area. You don't buy an asset you don't want to end up taking the property back, is that you'll be able to buy it. And he's so scared of that for some reason. I don't get it. Or he only wants specific properties in one specific zip code where he can drive to. I'm like, dude, you're all worried about Z. You need to worry about A, B, C, because if you buy at the right price and go through the legal process, you won't have to worry about this one guy buying your property. Everybody, just selling it on the MLS or selling it traditionally, you have plenty of buyers out there that provide it's in a good area. You don't buy an asset you don't want to end up taking the property back, is that you'll be able to buy it. And he's so scared of that for some reason. I don't get it. Or he only wants specific properties in one specific zip code where he can drive to. I'm like, there's plenty of opportunities. And he lives in Maryland, which you need a little separate license to get in Maryland. I'm like, there's so many more opportunities to think about, and you don't have to go do the work yourself. That's one of the big things about note investing is different from most folks, is that there are servicing companies who are doing this for thousands of mortgages out there. There are attorneys that handle the foreclosures for thousands of assets out there. You as a note investor need to go, find a deal and then obviously raise capital for it. But you're not going out and rehabbing the property. You're not going out and laying carpet and putting sheetrock in and painting it. We don't deal with toilets, tins, and trash yets. It's one of the less stressful ways of investing, as I like to say, and can be somewhat passive if you're just buying like performing paper. But that's the thing, is that you got to understand and be a little bit coachable. It's different than coming from, and he's been a commercial investor for years. I'm like, you're talking about owning and managing apartment complexes. That's one way. What you're trying to do is completely different, and he's just not coachable. So that's the biggest thing, is it's a different niche. You got to understand different terminology, different way of approaching things. That's the first thing. Second thing is patience. I think that's one of the most important things. We've seen people, they want to do a deal. I got to do a deal. I'm like, dude, relax. You don't have to do a skinny deal. There are plenty of deals and plenty of opportunities out there if you understand it, that if you start doing the marketing side, which is no direct mail campaigns, that saves you a lot of money. So it's either like LinkedIn or pick up the phone and dial in for dollars. It's all about that repetition of marketing. We have lived in such a society that the patience is kind of non-existent in a lot of cases, with instant gratification, everything being delivered to your door, your handheld. It takes time. It takes time to make offers. It takes time to get offers approved. It takes time going through the foreclosure process. In different states, it takes time to get the bar back on track. So that's the biggest thing. Build some patience and understand it's different, and be coachable, I would say, are two of the biggest things. And have some faith. I'm maybe a little bit more of a riverboat gambler than some folks, but like, if it's a good deal and you understand that it's really a good deal, you're buying a property, buying the note on a property at 50 cents of value, that's usually a phenomenal deal. If you'll just market, and that's another thing, you got to have a marketing mindset a little bit. Start marketing and sharing what you're doing. You'll raise enough capital. Everybody listening to this, I don't care how seasoned you are, is capable of raising $1 million or more in the next 90 days. If you'll market. If you just sit around and don't share people, you're a secret agent, or you don't talk to anybody, you're not going to raise any type of thing. So getting out and being a little more extroverted, even if you're introverted, is important.
Yeah, it's all very good advice. And, I know that you know this stuff very well because you have coached so many people, and you have seen, some of the excuses or some of the things that people don't want to do, and therefore you don't usually become successful at this.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is if you're trying to stay in your comfort zone, you'll never be successful at anything. You know what I mean? You got to get outside your comfort zone. And what you end up realizing is that most of your fears are just a facade. They don't really exist. It's just how we're programmed or how we're taught. And I think that a lot of that goes back to my parents telling me didn't tell me I couldn't do anything. So I just had to find a way to get it done. And that's one of the biggest things. It's actually easy to raise capital today that's ever been before, because of social media, and then the ability to jump on the county records and find lists of people who have used their self-directed IRA to fund a property, or have used their self-directed IRA to lend money out of it. I mean, it just takes some time, and then marketing to those lists or marketing online. It's one of the biggest things these days that you have to think. Got to market like it's 2025, not like it's 1995. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next question. Are you using... we talked about some ways that you're using AI, and we'll get to that in a sec. But are you happening to use any AI for this marketing piece?
Oh my God, yes. So people use AI a lot of times to ask questions and to come up with like lists. That's the easiest thing. Like, that's one of the things I teach my students. Like, listen, if you're trying to raise capital and you're targeting a specific niche or list area, go on to AI or Chat GPT or something like that and say, hey, give me a letter series, 7-letter series or 7 email series about how to raise capital and why notes are more advantageous over fix and flipping or rentals or something like that, or what their fears are. First thing is say, what are the biggest fears of real estate investors investing with their IRA, and then write the letter based off of that. That's the easiest thing you do. Or give me 52 weeks of email headlines that are associated with the calendar, so you can send out an email once a week to your database. These are all great things. But what we've been doing is taking like our audio, like I'll give you an example, like the audio from this podcast, we'll upload that to TurboScribe, which will do a complete transcription, and then I'll take that PDF and drop it into ChatGPT and say, hey, summarize this into 4,000 characters or less with an SEO-rich intro, outro, and then bullet points and the main features. And it'll literally write the blog article or YouTube description in seconds. And so now I have a really valuable piece of content that I can upload to my YouTube channel or the podcast episode. That's just one thing. But then I can also go and say, hey, can you create an image for the thumbnail for this podcast episode? And they can do that, describing a few things and being more detailed through like Canva, and that uploads it there. That's great. You can also take like what we get in like copies of the mortgage documents or a bankruptcy file. We can upload that to ChatGPT, say, hey, can you identify the pros and cons of this bankruptcy payment agreement or this loan documents, making sure everything in there, and they'll go in there, yep, here's these documents and here's the order and dates on them, so we all know everything's good and clean. So it's just absolutely mind-blowing at what it can do. We're working through even uploading spreadsheets into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you identify the best opportunities here based on A, B, or C, and going from there. That's a little bit hiccupy because it wanted to say, if we don't clean the spreadsheet up, get rid of the states we don't want to buy in, it's going to evaluate those, like buying a note in New York, similar to buying a note in Texas, and there's nothing similar about that. So got to be careful. Another thing is that, some of this AI stuff is also, it's kind of lazy too. So you got to re-stress it or refresh it and pay the $29 or $49 a month for it. It's well worth it. We've got some really cool things that we're working on right now, just to share more content or create more videos and get the word out. And we're doing, and I'll give you this example. We got this listing of the economic standing forecast for 855 cities across America, and how much overvalued they are, what's been their 1 year growth year over year in value, how much economists think they're overvalued, and then where do they see the markets going. It's all downhill. But I could take that spreadsheet for 855 cities, upload it in there, and then say, write a script to create a little blog for 855 of them. And then I can upload that into another AI engine called HeyGen with my avatar, my face, and my voice. And it can create 855 videos that are a minute to 2 minutes long talking about the economic forecast of all those cities in minutes versus it would take me hours, if not days in some cases.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And there's also another thing that was really interesting you and I were talking about just before the show. Can you tell people this clone thing that you're working on? I love the concept.
Yeah, so we've toyed around a couple of things. There's one thing that we used, we're still messing around with, which we upload like our favorite 100 videos from YouTube. And people can go into this platform and type in a question, and it'll go in these 100 videos and find exactly where we stated what they asked. Find the second, the video, the minute. It's fully transcribed, which is nice, which is okay. It's a little clunky. I'm really excited about is an AI clone where we're basically uploading my YouTube videos, my blogs, my books, all our YouTube channels, all the podcasts I've been on, all the guest appearances, stuff like that. And it will become I won't say it's walking, but a talking, texting, even video aspect of it where you could go on and ask questions and I will answer it back to you in my own voice to answer all your questions about note investing or other things. And you can try to get me off. And I toyed with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and a few others out there. I've got some clones. We're using the same company for that. It's pretty stinking cool and sounds pretty freaky out there when you have your own voice coming back at you answering a question. And it's just the way it is. If you're not using AI in some sort, you're spending too much time or too much money trying to do it all yourself. I mean, even VAs, virtual assistants are great, but I think there's a new, ChatGPT has a new thing. It's called an AI assistant that literally is mind blowing, just like came out this last Friday as an update on some things. So it's just an interesting time to be a real estate investor and trying to figure what can I give the AI to do that's going to be accurate, or what can I offset so that it saves me time and money and increases productivity exponentially.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear this clone and see how it goes. Is that something that your members and like the general public get to use for free, or how would that work? Is that something?
So what we'll probably do is do like I always open up for people to make a phone call with me for 30 minutes. They can always pick up, go on my schedule and book a phone call with me and pick my brain for 30 minutes. And so that's what I'll probably do is is just make it open to the public for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you'll need to sign up for a monthly membership to get full access to it and go from there. My goal is to first, try to replace me teaching a class for 3.5 hours, where I can have it now an AI agent teach that, and give people kind of a self-guided questions to ask, prompts for people to ask from this class, and going from there. Just, it's fun. Don't get me wrong, I'll never stop doing video podcast episodes, but it's still pretty freaking cool to be able to offload a lot of those routine Q&As that people have.
Yeah, I'm sure you see the same questions all the time. So really cool to hear the stuff that you're working on, both in your business and in the AI space. We're so happy to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing all the information you have today. I know our listeners will really get a lot from what you talked about, and hopefully the listeners will, follow you and wait for that clone to come out so we can ask it some questions and mess around with that. So Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Every week we do a free book giveaway. Here's how to enter. All you have to do is like this episode and comment which book you'd like. 5 days after the air date, we'll pick one lucky winner and we'll ship it free. Some of the titles we have available are Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, Real Estate Millionaire Investor, and a couple others as well. E-Myth, Leaders Eat Last, and Go Giver. Scott's story is proof that you don't need to own real estate to build wealth. You can control the paper behind it. Note investing is about strategy, patience, and perspective. It's not always about speed, it's about structure. And as the market shifts and AI continues to evolve, opportunities will favor those who are creative, efficient, and focused. So whether you're chasing cash flow, discounted properties, or just looking for your edge, learning how to flip debt may be your most valuable move yet. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
For those out there listening, if you could do me and Ian one big favor, we as podcasters love to hear from our listeners. And so if you're getting value, which I know you are, from these episodes that Ian is kicking ass and taking names, I'm doing on a regular basis, is go over there, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and then also leave a 5-star review. We'd love to hear from you. If you don't like me, that's fine, but we know you like Ian, so leave him a good review, not me then in that case. But go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and then share this episode or the podcast with one friend as well you think might find valuable out there. It's one of the best things you can do for Ian to help support him on what he's doing here. And so go out, take some extra, buddy. And I look forward to seeing you all at the top at some point. Thanks, Ian, for having me.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice one. Appreciate it.
You too, buddy.